the fall of 1984, a young couple checked into a remote Arizona motel and was never seen again. Their car was found abandoned behind the building, the keys still inside. For nearly 40 years, no one knew what happened to them, until a former housekeeper came forward with a disturbing memory. She swore she saw 3 people check out the next morning, but only 2 names were in the logbook and the page torn out the very next day. If you're drawn to cinematic mystery thrillers based on unsolved disappearances and buried secrets, subscribe now and hit the bell icon. October 3rd, 1984, location Navajo County, Arizona, the Desert Palms Motel Room 6. The wind never stopped in the high desert. It scraped against the cinder block walls of the Desert Palms Motel, tugged at the rusting metal sign out front, and whispered through the gaps beneath the doors. Inside Room 6, a single lamp cast a warm circle of light over the small table where Ethan and Claire Delaney sat across from one another, finishing the last of their drive-through burgers. They had been on the road for 6 days, driving west from their hometown of Amarillo, with nothing but 2 duffel bags, a road atlas, and a borrowed camera. "I still can't believe we just did it," Claire said, her voice soft and tired. Ethan reached for her hand across the table. "We did, and it's ours now, no one else's." Claire smiled, but something in her eyes was hesitant. She glanced toward the window. Beyond it, only darkness and miles of empty desert. A neon vacancy sign buzzed faintly outside. The television murmured in the background, showing static between commercials. Room 6 smelled of disinfectant and dry carpet. A single key hung from a green plastic tag that read 6 in peeling gold numbers. Claire stood stretching. "I'll shower. Then we can figure out where to head next." Ethan watched her go, then turned toward the nightstand where the motel guest logbook lay open. He'd signed them in earlier that evening. Ethan and Claire Delaney, Texas, under the watchful eye of the clerk, who barely looked up from his radio. As the water started in the bathroom, Ethan looked around the room again. Plain walls, thin curtains, a humming conditioner. Everything felt ordinary, but something had shifted, subtle, wrong. He reached for the camera and snapped a photo of the window. No reason, just a flicker of unease. Then the bathroom door creaked open, but Claire hadn't finished her shower, and Ethan never made it to bed. October 6th, 2023, location Navajo County, Arizona. Desert Palms Motel closed. Since 1992, the dust was thicker than she expected. Lena Ortiz pulled her shirt over her nose and pushed open the cracked door to Room 6, her hiking boots crunching over a layer of dried plaster and old insect carcasses. Sunlight filtered through the warped blinds and slatted bands, casting long diagonal shadows across the peeling carpet. The Desert Palms had been closed for over 30 years, but Room 6 looked like someone had only recently walked away or tried to forget it ever existed. She stepped inside. Behind her, the documentary crew lingered near the old ice machine. It wasn't working, of course. Nothing was. The motel had lost power years ago, shortly after it shut down. All that remained was sun-dried infrastructure and stories whispered through decades of silence. "This is it?" one of the sound guys muttered. "Not exactly the Bates Motel." "No," Lena said quietly, "but 2 people vanished from this room and someone wanted it forgotten." She moved toward the bed frame, just a rusted skeleton, now its mattress long gone, and set her messenger bag on the floor. Inside were 2 things: her father's 1984 Minolta camera and a Xeroxed copy of the original missing persons flyer for Ethan and Claire Delaney. She unfolded the flyer. Missing Ethan and Claire Delaney. Last seen October 3rd, 1984. Age 26. Ethan, 24. Claire driving a light blue Buick Skylock, Texas plates. No known history of mental illness or criminal behavior. Considered endangered. Her fingers trembled slightly. She wasn't doing this for content, not just for that. This case had haunted her since the night her grandfather, a former Navajo County deputy, drunkenly told her the phrase that stuck. "We never logged him out." No one had understood what he meant at the time, but Lena had grown up with dusty boxes of old police reports in the back of the house and a fascination with unsolved cases. The Desert Palms mystery had become her obsession. And now, with her true crime docuseries, Desert Shadows, picking up traction online, she'd finally convinced the property's current owner to let her in. The innkeeper's ledger, the original motel guestbook, had been stored in a shed behind the office. She'd found the entries from that week, but one page had been torn out. Later that afternoon, the crew wrapped for the day. Lena stayed behind. She wandered the quiet parking lot, boots crunching gravel, the sun hot against her shoulders. The Buick Skylark the Delaney's had driven had been found 3 days after their check-in, parked out back near a broken fence. The keys had been inside trunk empty, no blood, no bodies, just absence. She walked around to that same spot, now brushing aside thorny weeds that had grown up through the gravel, a few scattered beer cans, a rusted hubcap, but something glinted under a layer of compacted dirt near the base of the fence post. She knelt and dug gently, a small sliver of something white with faint blue lines. Her heart kicked hard. It was paper-faded brittle, but preserved in the dry climate. She unfolded it carefully, brushing away sand. It was part of a registration slip, handwritten. Delaney Room 6, check-in, October 3rd, 1984. Checkout blank. The bottom corner had a faint red smear, ink, blood, and something else. Barely legible pencil markings scrolled across the margin. 3 guests, not 2. 1 didn't speak. Lena stood slowly, the note trembling in her hand. Someone had tried to log them out. Someone else had made sure they never did. She turned toward the motel's office where the safe still sat bolted to the concrete floor. The locksmith she'd hired was due the next morning. Whatever had been hidden in that building for nearly 4 decades, she was going to open it. And this time, someone was finally going to log the truth. October 7th, 2023. Location Navajo County, Arizona, Desert Palms Motel office. The locksmith arrived at sunrise. He was a lean man in his 60s with weathered hands and a faded denim shirt. He introduced himself simply as Dale and didn't ask many questions, which Lena appreciated. She didn't need another amateur sleuth or a true crime junkie complicating things. She needed someone who could break into a safe last opened during the Reagan administration. Models, old Dale said, squatting beside the rust-flecked safe in the corner of the motel office. Standard floor bolt quarter-inch steel body. Might have been good in its day, but 30 years of dust and desert heat shouldn't be too hard. Lena nodded, kneeling nearby with her camera already rolling on a low tripod. The rest of the crew was en route, but she didn't want to waste the morning light. The office smelled of dry rot and old paper. Spiders had claimed the file drawers, and the floor creaked under her boots. How long, she asked. Dale shrugged, fishing a flat-edged tool from his kid. 15 minutes if she's friendly. Lena exhaled slowly, her heart thumping against her ribs. The scrap of registration paper she'd found behind the fence was sealed in a clear evidence sleeve in her bag. She kept pulling it out, rereading that line. 3 guests, not 2. 1 didn't speak. It had haunted her all night. Who was the third person? 10 minutes later, the safe door gave a low metallic groan and swung open. Inside 2 Molda Atatan ledgers, a small lockbox, a few rolls of film and cracked canisters, and an envelope marked police copy. Lena snapped on gloves and carefully removed the contents. Take your time, Dale said, stepping back and lighting a cigarette just outside the door. I'll be out here. The ledgers were motel logs, the official versions, not the display guestbook guests used in the front. She flipped to the first week of October 1984, and there it was, October 3rd, Delaney Room 6, 2 nights, prepaid cash note, late arrival, quiet couple, car, Buick Skylark. But the checkout column was blank, and directly under the Delaney's line, someone had written in hurried script, October 5th, Room 6, paid cash. J. Malik plus 1 guest, no ID. Line crossed out with thick pen, ink bled through. Lena's eyes narrowed. Why would a second entry be crossed out only for that room? She opened the envelope, marked police copy. Inside were photocopies of incident reports, Deputy Emery's original missing persons log, a short statement from the motel manager, and a single typed memo that froze her blood cold. 2 Navajo County Sheriff's Department from Sergeant R. McIrnean. Subject Desert Palms incident. Follow-up log. Guest log shows 2 check-ins, one of which appears to overwrite the Delaney entry. Page has since been torn. No forced entry, no signs of struggle. Manager claims couple left on October 5th, but car remained in rear lot for 3 days. Room 6 key returned, but not to front desk found in mailbox. Advised not to pursue further due to insufficient evidence. Recommend closure unless remains are located. Lena let the paper fall back into the envelope. The implications were clear. They hadn't just vanished, someone had replaced them. By mid-Emma morning, the full crew arrived. Lena asked them to film a supplemental segment near the mailbox, a rusted wall fixture still bolted near the front office door. She held up a replica of the motel key, filmed the entry log, and detailed the evidence from the safe. After they wrapped, he climbed into a rental jeep and drove into town. Navajo County was small, and like most small towns, memories lingered, especially when tragedy was involved. Her first stop was the public library. The local history section held copies of old police logs, newspaper clippings, and microfilm reels. It took 2 hours of patient searching before she found what she needed. October 1984, Navajo County Gazette. Young couple missing after stay at local motel. Authorities are searching for Ethan and Claire Delaney of Amarillo TX, who were last seen checking into the Desert Palms Motel on Route 77. Their vehicle was found on the property, but no trace of the couple has been located. Deputies say the case is unusual but not criminal at this time. She flipped to the next edition, a follow-up article dated 5 days later. Motel staff cleared in Delaney case. The manager of the Desert Palms, Mr. John Malik, was questioned regarding the missing couple. Malik claimed the Delaneys left early on October 5th and did not leave a forwarding address. Deputies confirmed payment was made in cash. No further evidence was found. Case remains open but inactive. Malik, the same name from the overwritten line in the guest log, the man who claimed they left early. And now Lena knew. He had signed himself in after they vanished. That evening, she sat outside the closed motel laptop, balanced on her knees, hotspot flickering in and out. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long orange streaks across the desert. She found a single online obituary for a John Malik, deceased 2002, buried in Holbrook, but he had a daughter, a Rosie Malik, who had commented on the obituary form and listed her email as a contact for friends. Lena's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she began typing. Subject, your father, John Malik. Dear Rosie, my name is Lena Ortiz. I'm a researcher working on a cold case from 1984 involving the disappearance of Ethan and Claire Delaney. Your father's name has come up repeatedly in motel logs and follow-up reports. I believe your father may have written something or left something that could help explain what happened to them. I was wondering if we could talk with respect. Lena Ortiz. She hit send. Then she sat in the creeping silence of the Arizona dusk, staring at the empty window of room 6, and wondered how many secrets could fit inside a space that small. October 8th, 2023. Location, Holbrook, Arizona. Malik family residence. Rosie Malik didn't look like someone with secrets. She opened the door wearing a faded cardigan, her gray hair tucked into a loose braid and a soft, cautious expression that aged her beyond her early 50s. Lena stood on the porch of the modest bungalow with her camera case slung over one shoulder and a notepad in hand, careful not to appear too eager. The last thing she wanted was to spook a woman who might hold the key to everything. "You're the one who emailed me?" Rosie asked. Her voice was quiet but firm, the voice of someone who had lived through quiet grief and noisy rumors. "Yes," Lena said. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I only have a little time. I need to take my grandson to a speech therapy class at noon." She stepped aside. "Come in." The inside of the home was warm and filled with the smell of cinnamon and old upholstery. Family photos lined the mantel. Birthdays, graduations, a wedding from the 90s, but no photos of her father, not a single one. Rosie gestured to a chair near the coffee table. "I read your message 5 times before I responded. I wasn't sure I should. I appreciate that you did," Lena said, sitting down. "I need to ask you about something strange about a guest log entry your father signed the day a couple went missing at the Desert Palms Motel." Roz's eyes didn't flinch. She sat across from Lena, resting her hands on her lap. "My father was a cruel man," she said simply. The sentence hung in the air like dust in the sunlight. "He owned that motel for 15 years, she continued. "I was 13 when he bought it. We moved out there from Winslow after my mom passed. It was supposed to be a fresh start." Lena waited. She didn't interrupt, but something changed him out there. I don't know if it was the isolation or the kind of people who drifted through, but by the time I turned 16, I started to realize that there were things he didn't want found. Lena leaned forward. "You mentioned in your reply that he left behind some journals." Rosie nodded slowly. Locked away in his closet, he kept them in a red metal cash box. He wrote in them at night when he thought everyone was asleep. After he died, I almost burned them. But you didn't. No. Rosie stood, left the room, and returned a moment later with a weathered metal box in her arms. She sat it on the coffee table, unlocking it with a small brass key she kept on a necklace around her neck. Inside, spiral notebooks yellowed with age. Some were water-stained, others were nearly shredded at the spine. All of them bore her father's meticulous handwriting. He was paranoid, she said. He thought the police would come for him, but they never did. Lena carefully opened the first journal marked 1984. She skimmed pages filled with motel records, rambling observations, and cryptic notations. Room 6, quiet couple, didn't speak much, paid cash, something off. She watched the mirror too long. 3 guests now. 1 arrived late, no check-in. He doesn't blink, never blinks. Don't trust his name. The girl screamed once, muffled. I didn't move. Lena's breath caught. What does that mean? She whispered. Rosie shook her head. I've wondered for years. He started writing strange things that summer. Words that didn't feel like his. Sometimes I think he was trying to confess. Other times I think he was still lying. Lena turned to a torn page near the back. They left, but the car stayed. He said to clean it all. Room 6, key in the box. Told me not to speak. Said if I tell, I go in the walls too. In the walls, Lena looked up sharply. I didn't know what that meant, Rosie said, until we renovated the house 10 years ago. She stood again and walked to a narrow hallway. Follow me. The guest bedroom was small, lined with dusty bookshelves and a single bed with a faded quilt. Rosie crossed the room to a built-in cabinet on the far wall. He used to keep files in here, blueprints, permits. I never thought much of it. She knelt and pulled up a square of carpet. Beneath it, a wooden panel with a recessed handle. He built this himself. Lena crouched beside her, helping lift the panel. Below, a shallow cavity no more than 3 feet deep, filled with file boxes, rolled blueprints, and a layer of crumbling insulation. Rosie reached in and pulled out a flat manila envelope. Found this during the remodel. Didn't open it until last year. She handed it to Lena, who carefully unsealed it. Inside a Polaroid, a color photo warped with time. It showed Claire Delaney unmistakably, her from the missing persons flyer, standing in room 6 wearing the same clothes she'd last been seen in. Her eyes were wide, terrified, her wrists bound with electrical cord, and behind her a mirror. In the mirror's reflection, a third figure, tall, expressionless, half hidden in shadow, stood watching her. Lena's hands shook. What is this? She whispered. I think my father was forced to take it, Rosie said. I think the man in the mirror wasn't Ethan. I think he was the reason they vanished. That night, Lena sat in her motel room in Holbrook, out staring at the photo under the soft bedside lamp. Claire had been alive after the supposed checkout date. Someone else had entered room 6, and someone who didn't speak, didn't blink, and didn't check in, had been inside with her. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You're asking the wrong people. Room 6 never closed, you just stopped looking. Lena stared at it. No caller ID, no reply option. She read the message again. Room 6 never closed. October 9th, 2023, location Navajo County Sheriff's Office. Cold case archives. The records room smelled like cardboard and time. Lena stepped into the climate-controlled silence of the sheriff's department basement, escorted by Deputy Tams and Reyes, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s with a ponytail, pressed slacks, and a badge clipped cleanly to her belt. We don't let civilians in here often, Reyes said, flicking on the overhead lights. Rows of steel shelves stretched into the dim, each one crowded with bankers' boxes, folders, and unmarked binders. But the sheriff oyed your request, said, If you're stirring up the Delaney case, you might as well have full access. Lena nodded. I appreciate it. I'm not trying to interfere with active investigations. I'm just trying to figure out what went wrong back then. What went wrong? Rahia said, crossing her arms. Is that no one cared much in '84 when a young couple from out of state disappeared? They chalked it up to an allotment gone wrong. No bodies, no crime. Lena paused. You sound like you don't believe that. Reyes gave a faint smirk. Let's just say I've seen too many people disappear quietly in this county. Not all of them had someone like you digging after them. Lena followed Reyes to a shelf labeled Unsolved, 1980 to 1989. The Delaney folder was easy to spot, a single half-inch file wedged between thicker binders. "This is it?" Lena asked. "That's all that made it to archives," Reyes said. "There was supposedly more, but no one knows if it was misfiled, lost, or never existed." Lena opened the file carefully. There were only 6 pages inside. Initial incident report. Officer Dean Wilkes responded to a call from motel manager John Malik on October 5, 1984. Malik claimed the couple had left early, but their car remained. No sign of struggle. Room appeared normal. Property tag. Vehicle found behind the motel. Blue Buick Skylark unlocked. Keys and ignition. Personal items left inside, including Claire's purse and Ethan's shoes. Follow-up interview. Malik reiterated they had left around dawn. Claimed they were in a hurry. No CCTV at the property. Evidence submission form. 1 Polaroid camera submitted. No film inside. Final status update. Case marked inactive. Insufficient evidence. Supplemental note. A handwritten page unsigned. Room 6. Mirror not secured properly. Large crawl space behind. Found scratch marks on the inside frame. No prints. No follow-up ordered. Lena stared at the last note. "Deputy," she said quietly. "Was the room ever forensically searched?" Reyes shook her head. "Not thoroughly. That's what bothers me. If that supplemental note is right, if there was a crawl space, it would have been the perfect place to hold someone or stash something." Lena tapped the note. No prints, no follow-up, no explanation. Exactly. Lena closed the file. "I want to go back tonight." Reyes frowned. "Alone?" "No," Lena said, "with someone who can remove a mirror." October 9th, 2023. The desert night was unnaturally still. No wind, no insects, just silence and dust. Lena stood in room 6 again, her flashlight beam dancing across the yellowed walls. Deputy Reyes stood beside her in plain clothes, carrying a crowbar and a canvas tool bag. "You sure about this?" Reyes asked. "No warrant. This place has been abandoned since 1992. We have the owner's permission. We're just checking old infrastructure." "Right." Reyes smirked and approached the mirror above the rusted dresser. It was large, nearly 4 FOT wide, bolted into the wall with 6 industrial-grade fasteners. The glass was cracked near one corner but intact. Reflected in it, Lena saw herself standing behind Reyes and nothing else. No shadow in the corner, no second figure, but the memory of the Polaroid still haunted her. Reyes went to work loosening bolts with practiced hands. After 20 minutes, the final screw clattered to the floor. With a grunt, she slid the mirror forward and leaned it against the bed frame. Lena stepped forward. Behind the mirror, a recessed cavity nearly 4T tall, 5 FT wide, a crawl space. It was dark, deeper than it looked, encoded in cobwebs. The back wall was unfinished concrete, but the bottom edge was covered in scratched paint and something else. Faint drag marks. "There's something back there," Lena whispered. Reyes handed her a flashlight. "Go slow." Lena crouched and crawled forward. Her knees scraped against the wood floor as she maneuvered deeper into the void. The air grew colder. The smell was stronger here. Old mildew and something else metallic stale. She reached the back wall and found a hinged panel cleverly disguised in the wood slats. She pressed gently. It swung open with a groan. Inside, a tattered denim jacket folded over what looked like bones. Human ribs collapsed against the floorboards, partially buried in silt. Lena recoiled. Reyes leaned in behind her flashlight, sweeping the small chamber. "Oh my God!" Lena swallowed. "We need a forensic team now." But she wasn't finished. Near the remains was a second item, an undeveloped roll of film labeled October 84th in faded Sharpie. And next to it, a chain gold delicate with a name tag still legible through the grime. Claire, 1:36 a.m. October 10th. Back outside sirens lit up the desert road. Forensics vans arrived. Reyes gave a statement to the mobile team. Lena sat on the hood of her Jeep, wrapped in a blanket someone had handed her, staring at the motel's broken neon sign. Desert Palms vacancy, always vacancy. The crawl space had been silent for decades, and inside it, truth had sat waiting, patient, buried, and cruel. As the forensics team photographed the bones and bagged the jacket, Lena felt her phone buzz in her pocket. A new message. You opened the wrong side. The man who checked out was never written down. Look under the foundation. Room 7. Lena stared at the screen, ice in her chest. Who was sending these? And how did they know what came next? October the 10th, 2023. Location Desert Palms Motel. Room 7 adjacent to Room 6. The morning sun cast long streaks of gold over the cracked stucco of the desert palms. Officers moved in and out of Room 6, cataloging every inch of the hidden cavity behind the mirror. But Lena's attention was no longer on the past. It was on what might be buried next. She stood outside Room 7, the room directly next to where Claire's remains had just been found, gripping the mysterious text in one hand and the motel blueprint she'd found in Malik's cache in the other. You opened the wrong side. Those 5 words had kept her awake all night. Deputy Reyes emerged from Room 6, brushing her palms against her jeans. They confirmed it, she said. Dental records match. That was Claire Delaney. Lena nodded slowly, eyes on the gravel. I think Ethan's under Room 7. Reyes raised an eyebrow. You're guessing based on an anonymous text. I'm not guessing. Lena unfolded the blueprint and held it up to the light. Look here. There's a crawl space running under both rooms, but the diagram shows an anomaly, a reinforced concrete section under Room 7. It doesn't match the rest of the slab foundation. It was added after the building was constructed. Reyes studied the blueprint. You think Malik poured a second slab to hide something? I think someone did, and I think Ethan's body is under it. Reyes sighed. It's circumstantial. I'll need clearance from Sheriff Proctor. Then get it, Lena said. Because whoever killed Claire didn't just vanish. They checked out under someone else's name. 3:47 p.m., same day, Room 7 interior. They broke through the floor just after 3. The forensic excavation team had arrived with ground-penetrating radar and jackhammers. Lena stood just outside the threshold of Room 7 with Reyes and a technician as the cement floor cracked and groaned under pressure. It took 40 minutes to reach the second slab, the one poured beneath the original flooring. Here, said the lead tech, pointing to a discoloration in the concrete. Center of the room. That's where they reinforced it. Reyes stepped forward, cut through it. The sound of the drill biting into the concrete was deafening. Lena pressed her hands over her ears, her heart hammering as each layer of the past was peeled away. Then silence. A dull, hollow clunk followed. They'd hit something beneath. The team switched tools, working slowly now. Dust filled the air. Finally, the floor gave way to reveal a sunken cavity no more than 5 ft across. Inside, bones tightly curled, a wedding band still on the skeletal ring finger, and the remnants of a plaid shirt, a perfect match to the one Ethan had worn in the last photo ever taken of him. Lena turned away, breath catching in her throat. Deputy Reyes bent down and shined her light into the cavity. Jesus, she whispered. 5:30 p.m., same day, Navajo County Sheriff's Office. They brought in Lena for a full statement. She sat across from a whiteboard, scrolled with names, dates, arrows, connecting motel rooms, timelines, and 2 headshots of Claire and Ethan marked deceased. Reyes sat beside her, taking notes as Lena described the texts. Anonymous specific, always one step ahead. You think the killer's still alive? Reyes said. I think they're watching, Lena replied. She pulled out her phone and showed the most recent message received an hour after Ethan's remains were discovered. You're too close. Some doors stay locked for a reason. Reyes read it twice. You think Malik was working with someone. I think Malik was covering for someone. 10:04 p.m., Holbrook, Arizona, Rosie Malik's house. Lena returned to the Malik residence just as the streetlights flickered on. Rosie opened the door, her expression tense. I saw the news. We found Claire, Lena said, and Ethan, both of them. Rosie's hand went to her mouth. She stepped aside and motioned for Lena to enter. I need to ask you something, Lena said once inside about the man in the Polaroid. Rosie nodded. You told me your father was afraid of him, that he wouldn't speak, that he appeared without warning. Did your father ever mention his name? Rosie hesitated, then turned toward the fireplace. He never said it, but once I found this. She reached into a drawer and produced an old motel envelope, the kind used for receipts. She handed it to Lena. Inside, a scrap of motel stationery with a single word scribbled in pencil. Whitlow. Lena's brow furrowed. Whitlow. There was a rumor. Rosie said back in the 80s about a man who checked into Motel under other people's names. He'd leave before dawn, always wiping the logs. The staff called him the mirror guest. Why? Because you'd only see him in reflections, never in person. Lena's mouth went dry. The mirror, the crawl space, the shadows behind Claire. The man was never logged because he never existed on paper, but he'd left traces in fear and whispers and erased names, and someone was still protecting him. Later that night, Lena couldn't sleep. She sat in the dim light of her motel room, staring at the name scrolled on the back of the Desert Palms envelope. Whit Low. It wasn't just a lead. It felt like a phantom someone had tried to scrub from history. She'd already run the name through online databases, genealogy sites, and law enforcement bulletins. No arrest records, no known address, no photo. It was like chasing smoke. She opened her notebook and flipped back to the torn registration slip she'd found behind the fence. 3 guests, not 2. One didn't speak. Who was the third, and why did he stay in the walls? By sunrise, she was back at the Desert Palms with Reyes, who looked equally sleep-deprived and on edge. I got a call this morning, Reyes said, rubbing her eyes. The sheriff wants us to stand down, turn everything over to cold case, and let the department handle it. Lena stared at her after what we just found. He's citing jurisdiction, wants to avoid outside interference, said the family of the Delaunay's will be notified properly, and that the rest is department business. That's code for bearing it, Lena said flatly. Reyes didn't argue. She opened the back of her SUV and handed Lena a slim manila envelope. This wasn't officially logged. I found it last night in an unscanned box from the original 1984 evidence stack. Lena opened it and pulled out a page, a carbon copy of a handwritten maintenance ticket, October 2nd, 1984, requested by J. Malik. Room 7, mirror anchor unstable. Room 8, foundation settling, noted. New crawl space crack behind wall in room 6. Rain specked crawl access. On the back, in a different hand, someone had scribbled a phone number in a single word. Whit Low. Lena's pulse kicked. Someone had flagged him, and Malik had still let him in. Later that day, Lena drove east out of Holbrook, following a hunch that was more gut than logic. She passed the red cliffs and endless scrub of the Arizona high desert, every mile blurring her thoughts into static. If Whitlow was real, he wasn't going to show up on a background check. He wasn't going to be in a photo album or a fingerprint database, but he might still be in someone's memory. She pulled into the Navajo Nation's Historical Preservation Archive, a modest building off a side road, with peeling turquoise trim and a hand-painted sign. Inside, the air was cool and lined with shelves of aging tribal documents, local records, and land use reports going back 100 years. The curator, a reserved woman in her 70s named Marie Noda, led Lena to a back room filled with filing cabinets and micro fish reels. I heard about the Delaney case on the local radio, Marie said. People used to whisper about that motel even before the disappearances. What kind of whispers? Lena asked. Marie paused. There was talk of a drifter, she said. White man tall, came through maybe once or twice a year. Never said much. Paid in exact cash. Stayed only one night. Always in room 6. Lena's skin prickled. Anyone ever get a name? Marie reached into a drawer and pulled out an old missing persons bulletin from 1979. The image was sun-faded, the corners curled. Not missing exactly, she said, but no one's seen him since the late 80s. Name was written down once on a Navajo land trespass form. He was caught camping out near Canyon to Chell. Refused to give ID, just said he was passing through. When the ranger filled out the form, he asked him for a name. Guy just said one word. She turned the paper toward Lena, scrolled at the top of the form, Whitlow. By the end of the week, the story had begun to catch fire online. Local reporters picked up Lena's footage from the motel excavation. Regional outlets called it the Desert Palms cold case. Reddit threads speculated everything from cult involvement to government conspiracy. Most ignored the unsettling truth. The likeliest suspect had never left a trace of himself. He had only ever shown up in fragments, a mirror reflection, a scrolled note, a voice through a wall. Lena sat in her motel room again on Friday night, staring at her edit timeline, the footage from room 6 and room 7 open on dual monitors. She slowed the video frame by frame, watching herself, and Reyes removed the mirror, revealed the crawl space, uncovered the remains, and then something caught her. In one frame, just one, the reflection of the camera operator passed across the broken glass. But behind him for less than a second there was another shape, a tall figure unmoving, barely visible in the shimmer. There had been no one else in the room. She froze. The frame zoomed and her breath hitched. The reflection had no face. At midnight, her phone buzzed again. "You found her. You found him, but you haven't found me. I never left. Room 6 was mine before it was theirs. The housekeeper saw me. She just never told you." Lena's hands trembled. There had been a housekeeper. She remembered the name from the old interview notes. It had been buried in the police report, a 17-year-old, working part-time at the motel. She pulled up the file. Dolores Huxley, current address still in Navajo County, still alive, and listed in public records as legally blind since 1986. Lena stared at the screen. The housekeeper hadn't spoken in 40 years, because maybe she hadn't just seen the third guest. Maybe he had seen her back. The next morning, Lena drove south through brittle sunlight and rust, cold dust, her tires humming along a road no one seemed to use anymore. According to public records, Dolores Huxley lived in a mobile home park near Snowflake, Arizona, a forgotten cul-de-sac where curtains stayed drawn and satellite dishes leaned like dying sunflowers. Lena pulled into a gravel drive beside Lot 14 and stepped out slowly. The house was quiet. A faded wind chime clinked dully against the porch. A hand-painted sign hung crookedly on the screen door. No solicitors, no church groups, no excuses. Lena knocked anyway. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the door creaked open. A woman stood in the shadows, late 70s, sharp cheekboned with cataracted eyes and a thick braid of white hair over one shoulder. "Miss Huxley," Lena asked softly. "You the one digging up ghosts?" the woman replied. Lena hesitated. "I'm trying to find out what really happened in room 6. Dolores sniffed. "Then you're late." She stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in, shoes off." Inside the home was small but clean, every surface covered in crocheted runners and religious figurines. A tabby cat slept curled on the windowsill. The air smelled like lemon polish and menthol. Dolores poured Lena tea in silence, then sat across from her at the kitchen table. "You used to work at the Desert Palms Motel," Lena began. "Part-time summer of 1984 June through October," Dolores confirmed. "Was supposed to save for school. Didn't get that far. Do you remember Ethan and Claire Delaney?" Dolores nodded slowly. "They were polite kind, tipped $5 on the second night. Most people didn't leave nothing. What do you remember about the night they disappeared?" Dolores stared off toward the curtained window. That was the night the air felt wrong. Wind stopped. Crickets stopped. Like the whole world was holding its breath. She traced her finger around the rim of her mug. "I knocked on room 6 to clean it around 10:00 in the morning. Mr. Malik told me to skip it. Said they'd checked out early, but the car was still there. I saw it when I took the linens to the dumpster. So you knew they hadn't left." Dolores's eyes turned to glass. "That's not why I remember. I remember because when I passed the room, the door was open just a crack, just wide enough." Lena leaned forward. "What did you see?" Dolores's voice dropped to a whisper. A man standing just inside, not Ethan, too tall, pale, didn't blink. He was facing the mirror, staring at it like it was water. "Did he see you?" Dolores's breath caught. He turned, looked right at me, but not with hate, not even anger, just emptiness. Lena's voice was low. "Was it Whitlow?" Dolores shuddered at the name. "I don't know who he was, only that when I blinked, he was gone." The door slammed shut. Lena scribbled furiously in her notebook. "Why didn't you tell the police?" Dolores shook her head. "Malik told me not to. Said it would ruin the motel's name. Said he'd deny I ever worked there. Said..." She paused. "Said that man knew where I lived." Lena closed her notebook slowly. "But he's gone now," she said. Dolores gave a bitter smile. "He's not gone. Not really. You don't bury a shadow. You just lose track of where it's standing." Later that day, Lena returned to Holbrook and stopped at a small roadside diner off Route 77. She needed a break, a breather, just 30 minutes to clear her head and write her update before the next lead. She sat at a window booth with her laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. Claire's remains had been identified. Ethan's too. Deputy Reyes had sent her the forensic analysis confirming both had died within hours of one another. Strangulation, no hesitation marks, no defensive wounds. Clean, clinical, like someone who'd done it before. The waitress brought her coffee and Lena thanked her eyes, never leaving the screen. But then she noticed something odd, the receipt. There was no name on it, no table number, just a printed message at the bottom. Checkout complete. Room 6 reserved. See you soon, Lena. W. She jerked her head up. The waitress was gone, so was the cook. The diner was empty, dead silent. Lena stood slowly, blood pounding in her ears. She turned toward the window and saw it. Across the highway, standing just beyond the tree line, was a man in a long gray coat. Tall, still watching. No face, no movement. Lena grabbed her bag and rushed outside. But by the time she crossed the road, the figure was gone. Only the rustling trees remained, and the lingering impression that someone had been waiting. That night, she reviewed the old film roll they'd recovered beneath room 6. The forensic team had digitized the negatives. Most were damaged. A few showed typical snapshots, a motel sign, an empty room, a flash of ceiling tiles. But the last frame it showed, Claire bound kneeling in the corner of the crawl space, her eyes wide and behind her reflected in a sliver of broken mirror. That same expressionless figure. Long coat, no discernible face, no eyes, just a presence. She clicked back to Dolores's words. He didn't blink. He looked at me like I was already gone. Lena stood up dizzy and walked to the bathroom mirror. She turned the lights off. In the darkness, her reflection stared back. And for the briefest moment behind her shoulder, something moved. She didn't turn around. She just whispered, "I see you." And the room fell silent again. October 11th, 2023. Location, Navajo County, Arizona. Sheriff's Department Archives. By the next morning, the silence had settled into Lena's bones. She sat across from Deputy Reyes again this time, in a small, windowless room, buried deep inside the department's archives, a place used for dust-covered folders no one expected to open again. The events at the diner had left her shaken but not broken. She was past fear now. She handed Reyes the receipt she'd saved from the night before, the one printed with a personalized message. Reyes studied it carefully. No employee initials, she said, no timestamp. This doesn't match standard point-of-sale formatting. It's like it was printed just for you. Lena nodded. Whoever left it was in the system, or at least in the building. And you're sure there was a man across the road? I'm not crazy if that's what you're asking. I'm not, Reyes said. I believe you, but we're running out of official explanations. Lena pulled out the photo from the old film, the last frame. She slid it across the table. Reyes leaned in slowly, lips parting. Oh my God. There in the corner of the image, barely visible in the cracked sliver of mirror behind Claire, was the shape, tall, indistinct, watching. You're seeing it too, Lena said. Right. Reyes nodded, her voice quieter now. Whatever this is, it didn't end in 1984. Lena took a breath. I need to see everything. Every report connected to the desert palms. Even the cases that didn't make it into the Delaney file. Reyes rose, motioning for her to follow. They moved deeper into the archive wing, Reyes scanning old index cards tucked into metal drawers. She stopped at one labeled Desert Palm Supplemental 1982 to 1991. She pulled the drawer open, then paused. Most of the files were intact, yellowing with age, but one folder was scorched black at the edges. The tab was melted. Inside, only a few brittle sheets remained. Someone tried to destroy this, Reyes muttered. She laid the papers out. There were fragments of 3 reports, one from 1982, referencing a motel guest who checked in under no name paid cash and was found sleeping in the laundry closet. The report was signed by an officer who later left the department and moved out of state. One from 1985 stating that an unknown man had been seen entering the motel through the back fence multiple times. The description, tall, pale, silent, did not respond to questioning. Vanished before backup arrived. And one from 1989, a handwritten note unsigned. He doesn't stay in the room. He stays in the walls. You don't hear him until he's already behind you. Lena's skin went cold. Whitlow wasn't just a drifter, she whispered. He was stalking that motel for years. Reyes nodded grimly, but nobody ever caught him. Nobody ever really tried. Lena looked at the note again. You don't hear him until he's already behind you. She stood abruptly. I need to see the original guest log books again. Not the police. Copies. The real ones. The ones from the property owner. Later that afternoon, Lena met with the current property owner, an older man named Russ Harmon, who'd inherited the Desert Palms land from a distant uncle and had never found a reason to bulldoze it. I was going to sell it as scrap, he said, unlocking a rusted shed behind his house. Then you folks came nosing around. Inside, Lena spotted it immediately. A crate marked ledgers 1980 to 1991. She pulled on gloves and began flipping through brittle pages. Most of the logs were handwritten, some in different pens, different hands. She flipped to October 3rd, 1984, the Delaney's check-in date. There it was. Delaney Room 6, October 3rd. 2 guests paid cash and 2 entries down faint as if written over erased ink. W arm 5, no time, no ID, no checkout. Lena's hand froze. He'd been logged just once, just an initial, just W. She flipped further. Page after page, sporadic entries, and then she found something else. October the 4th, 1986, Room 6, W, no cleaning. July 9th, 1988, Room 6W, stay behind mirror. Each one scrolled in different ink, different years, always W, always Room 6, always instructions, not to anyone else but as if to himself. By the end of the day, Lena sat in her Jeep parked outside the Desert Palms, watching the sky darken to violet. She hadn't returned inside yet, not since the discovery of Ethan and Claire's remains. The police had cleared the site, boarded up the rooms, taped off the crawl space, but the building felt alive. Lights flickered behind the sealed curtains, a movement just out of sight in the broken window panes. She knew what the next step was, not a podcast, not a video. She had to go in one last time alone. She grabbed her gear camera recorder flashlight and walked up the cracked steps of Room 6. The boards were loose, the tape already peeling. She pushed the door open. The smell was stronger now. Dust and something like rusted iron. The room groaned around her as if shifting under her weight. She stepped in. The mirror had been removed. The crawl space was sealed. She turned on her recorder. "If you're in here," she whispered, "I'm not leaving until I know who you are." A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun. Nothing. She took a step forward toward the old dresser and stopped. A single motel key sat on the surface. Tag number 6. Attached was a folded piece of paper. Lena opened it. Checkout is not optional. You chose this room. Now it chooses you. The lamp beside her flickered on by itself. She turned to run, but the door slammed shut. And behind her, in the cracked glass of the mirror leaning against the wall, something began to move. October 11th, 2023. Location Desert Palms Motel. Room 6. The door wouldn't open. Lena yanked the knob with both hands, the hinges rattling in protest, but it was as if the frame itself had locked from within. She turned to the mirror leaning against the wall, the one no longer bolted but still stained with time and warped by heat. The reflection shimmered unnaturally. Her own face stared back distorted, almost as if the mirror were a second behind a delay, like it was thinking about what to show. Then something else appeared, not in the room, but in the reflection. A figure too tall, motionless, a gray coat brushing the floor. A featureless face that seemed carved from ash. He didn't move, but he watched, and Lena could feel it deep in her spine and the hairs on her arms. Her body responded before her brain could. She backed away slowly. "Okay," she whispered, breath catching in her throat. "Okay, you want me here, I'm here." The lamp beside the dresser flickered again, then died with a final snap. Darkness swallowed the room. Lena fumbled for her flashlight, clicked it on, and swept the beam across the walls. The air grew colder. Her breath fogged, and on the far wall, something new had appeared, writing etched into the peeling paint with something sharp like a key or a nail. The walls, remember the names were erased, but the guests remain. She scanned beneath the message and found dozens of smaller carvings. Initials, dates room, numbers a pattern, W room 6, room 6, room 6, but mixed among them something else. ED, D 1984, CD 1984, DH 1986, JB 1989, RT 1991. She took out her notebook and matched the initials to the old unsolved cases from Navajo County. Some had been logged as runaways, others disappeared while traveling. All had one thing in common. They had stayed here in room 6. A few minutes later, Lena managed to force the window open. She kicked through the rusted frame, tearing her jeans on the ledge as she dropped into the gravel outside. The moment her feet hit the ground, the air felt normal again, warmer, quieter. She didn't look back at the window, didn't need to. She knew he was still there, watching from the other side of the glass. Later that night, she drove to Reyes's apartment just outside Holbrook, a small adobe building tucked behind a feed store. Reyes answered the door in sweatpants and a tank top, expression tense the moment she saw Lena's face. "What happened?" "He locked me in. Lena said he left me a key." They sat in the kitchen. Lena laid everything out. The notes, the mirror movement, the names on the wall. Reyes examined the carved initials, flipping through the matches. These cases were all closed as voluntary disappearances. No evidence of foul play. "There is evidence," Lena said. "It just wasn't in the room. It was in the walls." Reyes stood and began pacing. "We can't keep this internal. The department's not going to take another look unless there's a body." "There might be more," Lena said quietly. "I think there are rooms we haven't opened yet." Reyes turned sharply. "What do you mean I pulled Malik's original blueprints again?" "There's a door that doesn't match any exterior entry. It's between room 8 and the maintenance closet, but it's been drywalled over." Reyes rubbed her jaw. "Room 9. "No," Lena said. "It's not on the motel's official layout. There's no record of it being rented, no keys, no notes in the ledger." Reyes stared at her. "You think Malik or Whitlow used it? I think he lived in it." The next day, just before sunrise, they returned to the motel. No police backup, no team, just Reyes with her off-duty weapon and Lena with her camera and crowbar. They entered through the rear maintenance entrance, their flashlights cutting narrow beams through the dusty dark. Lena led the way down the corridor behind the guest rooms. She found it quickly, a section of drywall with mismatched paint, seam lines barely visible in the flashlight beam. The blueprint had been right. There was a space here, a hidden room. Reyes raised the crowbar and drove it into the seam with a sickening crunch. Drywall crumbled away in jagged sheets. Dust exploded into the air. They hacked for 5 minutes until a dark hollow opened on the other side. A wooden door, no handle. Reyes exhaled. "Jesus!" Lena stepped forward and pushed. It swung open easily. No lock, no latch, just a narrow hallway beyond. And at the end, a single room unlit. No windows smelling of damp wood and old fabric. Inside was a cot, a mirror, and a box of Polaroid photos. Dozens, maybe hundreds, spilled across the floor like dried leaves. Lena knelt down, picking one up. It showed a young woman, terrified hands bound. Another, a teenage boy gagged lying on a motel bed. Another, a middle-aged man, his face bruised, eyes wide. Every photo was the same. Someone at the edge of fear, lit by the flash of that instant. Documented, preserved, hunted, and on the back of every photo the same letter, W. Reyes, swallowed hard. "We have to call this in." Lena stared around the room. This wasn't just evidence, it was his archive. The one place he didn't need to hide, because it was already forgotten, because it had never been written down. And even as she stood there, the thought came unbidden, unshakable, chilling. How do you catch someone who was never logged in to begin with? October 12, 2023. Location Desert Palms, motel hidden room, back corridor. By the next morning, the Desert Palms was crawling with state investigators. Crime scene tapes sectioned off the entire east wing. A mobile forensics unit had been set up in the gravel lot where guests once parked. The air was thick with the sound of murmured voices, the clicking of cameras, and the scrawling of notes onto clipboards. And for the first time in nearly 40 years, Room 6 wasn't the motel's darkest secret. It was what lay behind it. Reyes stood at the threshold of the hidden room, arms folded, watching texts catalog the Polaroids. Nearly everyone had been numbered, placed in evidence sleeves, and photographed. But there were too many faces, too many names missing, and not all were accounted for. They only ID'd 6 of them, she told Lena. So far, but there are at least 34. Lena leaned against the wall, exhausted but sharp-eyed, and the ledger shows only one consistent signature. One letter, W. Reyes, nodded. Always, W. Lena opened her notebook, flipping to her most recent sketches, diagrams of the motel, the crawl spaces, the mirror placements. Everything pointed to a level of planning that no transient killer would have pulled off. He wasn't just staying here, Lena said. He was operating here like a spider. Reyes muttered, using the motel like a web. Inside the room, one of the crime scene photographers called out. Found something wedged behind the cot. They moved quickly, ducking beneath the tape. The tech lifted a rusted tin box from the baseboard, its lid sealed with duct tape. Reyes used a gloved hand to peel it open. Inside were 6 cassette tapes, each labeled in faint black marker R6, C1, R6, C2, R6, C3-1 for each camera, and on the back of the final tape, the one marked C6. A message was scratched into the plastic with something sharp. Last checkout, final recording. Do not copy. Later that day, the department transferred the tapes to a secure lab for conversion. Lena sat beside Reyes in a dark room lit only by the digitizing station. The forensic tech, a man named Jensen, inserted the final tape and adjusted his headphones. Static hissed through the speakers, then a woman's voice crying softly, the rustling of bedsheets, footsteps on carpet. Then a second voice, low, male, calm. You signed the book. Room 6, that means you stay. The woman screamed, then silence, and then a sound Lena couldn't place, like fabric stretching or flesh being moved across tile. Jensen flinched and paused the tape. You want me to keep going? Lena nodded. We need to know what's on it. The rest of the tape played in grim, awful fragments, echoes of pain, doors closing, breathing the scrape of fingernails against drywall, and at the end, a final whisper. So faint Lena had to lean forward to hear it. I never checked out. By the following afternoon, the case had exploded across regional media. Headlines ran with terms like Motel, Crypt Room of Horrors, and Arizona's Forgotten Dead. But despite the attention, the department hit a wall. There was still no confirmed identity for Whitlow. No driver's license, no fingerprints in national databases, no DNA matches, only that single haunting initial. And then came the most disturbing revelation. When techs tore out the subfloor beneath the hidden room, they found another ledger sealed in plastic and buried in concrete. It listed every date the hidden room had been used and the final entry, October the 3rd, 2023. Lena stared at the name type neatly beside it, L. Ortiz. Guest confirmed. She stepped back, stomach turning. That's 2 weeks ago, she whispered. Reyes pawed. That's your name, your exact name. But I never signed this. You didn't have to, Reyes said quietly. He was already watching you. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She sat in her hotel room with all the lights on, curtains drawn tight, the TV playing static just to drown out the silence. The receipt still sat in her wallet, the key to room 6 on the table, and she couldn't stop thinking about the whisper from the tape. I never checked out. She turned toward the bathroom mirror. It reflected her room perfectly. Too perfectly. She stepped forward slowly. The glass felt warm, and for a brief second she swore she saw something move behind her reflection. Not outside it, behind it. She touched the surface and it rippled like water. October 13th, 2023. Location, Winslow, Arizona. Whispering Pines Motor Lodge. By the next morning, Lena checked out of her motel. For real. This time she left the key at the front desk, signed the ledger herself, and stood in the parking lot for a full minute afterward, watching the sky. She needed to be sure she still existed. She had never felt less certain. Reyes picked her up in an unmarked SUV. No sirens, no radio chatter, just the weight of what they both now knew. Whitlow, or whoever W, really wasn't just a man. He was a pattern, a ritual, and that meant he could be repeated. Do you believe in hauntings? Lena asked quietly as they turned onto the highway. Reyes didn't answer right away. I believe buildings hold things, memories, energy, regret. Some places don't forget. Lena stared out the window. Then that motel never stood a chance. Later that day, they met with a forensic linguist flown in from New Mexico State. She specialized in analyzing handwritten patterns, suicide notes, ransom letters, even graffiti. They laid out all the writing pulled from the hidden room walls in the back of the photos. She examined the stroke's angle of pressure, the shape of the W. Her verdict, multiple authors, at least 3 different hands. But here's the thing, she said, tapping the notes. They're mimicking each other like someone was trying to write the same way on purpose over years. Lena felt her pulse rise. You mean someone was taught to write like W? Yes. possibly groomed, possibly replaced. By the end of the week, the search expanded statewide. An anonymous tip led to a long abandoned gas station 30 minutes east of Holbrook. Inside, police found more Polaroids, some of them water-damaged, others perfectly preserved. Among them was a photo Lena had never seen before. Claire Delaney sitting on a motel bed alive, and beside her, just barely in frame, a young man in a motel uniform. No name tag, blank expression, holding a clipboard and wearing room 6's key on a chain around his neck. It wasn't Whitlow, it wasn't Malik, it was someone else entirely, someone young. Lena turned to Reyes. He passed it down. Reyes nodded, like a job, like a franchise. That night, Lena returned alone to the archive room at the sheriff's department. The cassette tapes were still boxed for evidence, but one had been digitized and left running on loop in the review monitor. She hit play. The audio crackled, then cleared. A voice, female, faint. He said, "I checked in under someone else's name." He said, "That means I belong to him now." Lena shivered. The final part of the tape played again. The whisper she couldn't forget. "I never checked out," but now she heard it differently. Not as a declaration, as a warning. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself, "Then maybe it's time someone did." October 15th, 2023. Location, Desert Palms Motel. Room 6 after sunset. By the end of the week, Room 6 had become a sealed crime scene under 24-hour surveillance. But Lena had the key, not the one from the front desk, the original key. Tag worn smooth. Number 6 etched into the brass like a scar. The one she'd found on the dresser the night the door slammed shut behind her. And tonight she wasn't waiting for permission. She slipped past the patrol car just after sunset, flashlight off gear in her backpack. No camera this time, no podcast mic, no audience, just her. The air was dry still. The building was quiet enough to hear her own breath. She walked the corridor slowly, one step then another, until she reached the door. She didn't hesitate. The key slid in like it had never left, and the lock turned with a soft click. The room was colder than it should have been. Dust still hovered in the air from the forensic sweep, but something else had returned. A presence she couldn't explain, the kind that made her stomach tighten before her mind even caught up. She stood in the center of the room, beneath the crooked light fixture. "I came back," she said softly. No answer. She walked to the mirror, the same warped glass now leaning against the wall after police removed it. Her reflection stared back, pale, drawn older somehow. And then it blinked, but she didn't. Lena stepped closer. Her heart hammering the mirror shimmered again, and the reflection smiled. Not wide, just enough to be wrong. She dropped the flashlight. Its beam landed sideways, illuminating something she hadn't seen before. A door behind the mirror, a hidden panel in the wall, still cracked open, still waiting. She pulled it wide with both hands. It opened into darkness. Narrow stairs, damp cement walls, old wiring dangling like roots. The basement, the one not listed on any blueprint, the one beneath the hidden room. She descended slowly. The air thickened as she moved, breathable bra, but stale like nothing had stirred it in decades. At the bottom was a single bulb, flickering weakly overhead, and a chair, a recorder, and another mirror. But no man, no Whitlow, just the sound of something already recording. She stepped closer and picked up the tape deck. It was running, but she hadn't turned it on. A voice crackled through her voice. He said, "I chose this room." He said, "It chooses you back. I never checked out, but maybe now I can." She stood still, breath caught in her throat. She didn't remember recording those words, and yet there they were. A sound echoed behind her, a whisper, a breath, not a word, just presence. She turned slowly. The mirror now showed the chair, but it wasn't empty. It showed her bound mouth, taped eyes, pleading. She wasn't moving, but she was watching a perfect copy, a warning. She looked down. The chair was empty. She looked back, still not alone. Then the mirror shattered from inside. Lena screamed and staggered back, cutting her palm on the broken glass. She ran up the stairs, heart thundering, stumbling through the panel and back into room 6. The door slammed behind her, but this time she turned and unlocked it. The key still worked. She opened it, walked out, and this time nothing followed her. Not the smell, not the cold, not the shadow, just silence, just freedom. By sunrise, she stood at the edge of the desert, wind biting her skin, blood dried on her palm. Reyes met her there, engine idling behind her. "You went back in," she said. Lena nodded. "It's over for me." "You sure?" Lena looked down at her hand, the cut still raw, the key still clutched between her fingers. "No," she said, "but I checked out and I kept the receipt." She handed Reyes the brass tag. "Number 6. Burn it." Reyes took it, eyes steady. "Let's go home." November 3rd, 2023. Location Podcast Studio, Phoenix, Arizona. The red light blinked, recording live. Lena sat in front of the mic, the old motel ledger open on the table beside her. Pages photocopied names, highlighted room numbers, marked some names now crossed out, victims confirmed, others still unsolved. But she wasn't here to retell the horror. She was here to end it. "Most of you followed this case because it scared you." Her voice echoed calm but resolute. A forgotten motel, a couple that vanished, a page torn from a log book. She paused, but I followed it because it knew me, because it tried to make me part of its story. And for a while, I thought it had. Lena ran her fingers over the edge of the microphone. "I've stayed in dozens of motel for this show, slept under flickering lights, listened to things move in the walls, but I never imagined the wall could listen back." She looked at the last Polaroid on the table. Claire Delaney. Ethan's wedding ring just barely visible in her lab. They were real people, she continued. Not just entries on an evidence form. Not just cold cases. They were guests. Guests who never got to check out. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the envelope. Inside, a motel receipt, yellowed, stained, but intact. She held it up to the camera, recording the podcast's video feed. "My name's on this room, 6 October 3rd, 2023. But I didn't sign it." "He did." She leaned in closer to the mic. "And now I'm signing it myself." A pause, a breath. "I'm done being the story." She folded the receipt in half and set it on fire with a small match. Watched the flames curl around the ink. Watched her name disappear. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled. I checked out. Somewhere in a storage facility on the edge of Navajo County, the boxes from the Desert Palms Motel sat stacked behind a sealed chain-link fence. Room 6's brass key was not among them. It had melted, but inside one box, unmarked, buried beneath photos and receipts, was a small black notebook, blank except for one line written in fresh ink. "Guest logged. W will return.